All right, this is our first of several interviews with some professionals in the field who aren't necessarily currently working in Colorado. So I have with us Chris Kuntz, who is a conservation officer with South Dakota Game, Fish, and Parks, and he has been with that agency for about 10 years. And for the Colorado folks, that would be the equivalent of our Colorado Parks and Wildlife. So Chris, to get us started, if you could describe what your role is in your current job and kind of give us an overview of what a typical day looks like. And I know that you guys love that word typical day, so you can take that however you want.
So right now I'm working as a field officer, field level officer for about 10 years. And as Heather said, there is no typical day. It's pretty standard in our line of work, but for me, my year varies and my days pretty seasonally, depending on the time of the year. May through really April through middle of December, roughly, is mostly my busier time where I'm stationed at, and it's mostly out in the field or in a patrol vehicle somewhere. I mean, anything from doing school presentations to law enforcement to helping our wildlife staff. If they've got deer damage complaints or anything like that. It varies a lot. I mean, there's days you can spend go out in the field and then you're stuck in the office all day, or you're behind on paperwork and it's like, all right, it's a Wednesday, I'm going to go to the office, get caught up in paperwork so I can go have fun again. And you're in your office 30 minutes, the phone rings, and then somebody reported a mountain lion sighting, which where we're at is kind of an anomaly, and they like us to go look at some of that. Sometimes we deal with it, other times we pass it off to other folks, but you do that or you're helping out other agencies or whatever. So I mean, it really varies a lot.
Cool. Why did you choose to get into this field?
So I grew up kind of in a rural farming background to a certain extent. Family fished a bit. I don't really have a hunting background. I had a high school biology instructor that kind of offered me or kind of showed me a seasonal job. That kind of introduced me to the park and rec type field, we'll call it. Met some district wildlife managers in Colorado when I was going to school down there, and took a couple classes in high school, and decided that I liked the field. Wanted to go into law enforcement, didn't really know which route to go. So I did some ride-alongs with the local sheriff's office, police department, state patrol, and decided that I had more of a passion for the wildlife side of things, and dealing with folks. I'm not always show up, and it's not always a negative thing, typically. So you got a lot more freedom with that, and just felt that a lot more passion for dealing with wildlife and people in that aspect, and so you're responding to domestic violence calls and burglaries all the time.
So you kind of covered this a little bit, so don't feel bad repeating some of it, but I think it's important for students to see the evolution of how people end up in their current job. So could you walk us through your career path from high school, or maybe you mentioned starting in high school, so from that point to where you are today?
So I've got a kind of a narrow field, and but basically I started out as a boat assistant, so helping the seasonal park rangers out at Boyd Lake State Park in Colorado. I did that for 3 summers. Part of one summer was kind of some general maintenance and stuff like that too. After I graduated high school, I worked for Larimer County Department of Natural Resources up at Horsetooth for 3 summers. In there, late in high school through the Front Range program, did a couple internships at Laurie State Park, and then Bellevue Watson Fish Hatchery, to kind of learn some of that stuff. And after that, it was a few summers of seasonal work, and then after college, or towards the end of my college career, kind of wanted to get out of Colorado for a bit. Applied up here, and here I am.
You mentioned Front Range, but did you also attend a 4-year university?
Yep. So I went to Colorado State University, got a degree in natural resource management and minor in fish biology.
I didn't want to sell them short, so I throw that in there.
That's fair.
So speaking of education, what level of education is required for your type of position?
So we don't have, I think a high school diploma is typically all that's like formally required, but getting a job or even an interview without some sort of a degree is next to impossible. Most people that apply have a 4-year degree in natural resource field. That varies a little bit. I think there's some that might have a little variance outside of the natural resource realm, but it's pretty small. And then with that degree, they like to see some sort of seasonal work, whether like in our state, it's typically internships or seasonal work through our agency, whether it's, kind of habitat programs, helping on state, working on state managed game production areas, wildlife damage crews or fisheries crews. They like to see kind of a diverse background in some of that. They find it's kind of more of a well-rounded applicant. Or, I mean, there's a lot of people, a number of guys like myself that have, seasonal park ranger work or something like that too.
So, do you supervise any positions, or are there any other positions within the state that would maybe require less experience or less education?
I don't supervise anybody directly. I don't know. We've got a number of other jobs, some of the entry level like fish biology stuff or habitat type programs. Those guys I know have some sort of a college background, but I don't know. I don't know exactly what it's in specific. There's nothing. I know, even like a 2-year degree, we don't see, to my knowledge, even a lot of those applicants coming in. So I don't know how they would rank if you had a 2-year degree and then work experience. A lot of times you'd think it would balance out, but talking to our training coordinators, we just don't see a lot of those applicants coming in.
All right. All right. How much time would you say you spend indoors versus outdoors in your job?
For me, it's really seasonal. I call outdoors my patrol vehicle. A lot of that is going to be for me where my current station is that kind of April through December. I'm out in the field most of my time, other than doing some administrative reports and things like that in the office. That December through March, that's all I do. A lot of longer term investigations and things like that. Typically, I save those for those slower months, and then we do a lot of training, and a lot of our longer term trainings we'll try to schedule in kind of that time frame too. So, I don't, ish of 9 months out of the year, I'm out in the field or out of the office at least most of the time.
The best part of
So for me, I like the diversity. Whether you want to call it an adrenaline junkie or just not knowing what's going to happen or to expect. I don't want to be somebody that sits in a cubicle or an office. Your day is very typical and typically pretty structured out. I like the unknown. Whether you show up to work and I said earlier, I mean, you could sit in the office all day, doing your reports, or it could be something entirely else. Dealing with people in the field. I like talking to families and kids is great, but also there's that criminal element that you deal with as well. And so for me, I really enjoy the diversity of the work we do and how it kind of changes seasonally. So it's just not all the same thing all the way through your year.
So that'll be followed then with the typical, what's your least favorite aspect of your job?
So for me, I don't know. You always end up dealing with wildlife in some sort of a realm, whether it's deer, hawks, things like that. For me, I hate, there's times you can take stuff to get it rehab and patched up. There's other times you can't. So we end up putting a fair amount of critters down and dispatching them. For me, putting some of those things down, especially like babies, like a fawn or something like that, for me, that's hard to deal with just because I kind of feel bad for the thing.
All right. How much travel is required in your current position?
For us, travel, we have a duty station that we spend most of our time in. For the most part, you're home every night. That said, we do have annual in-service training and things like that. And the minimum that you're going to spend away from home is, depending on where you're stationed and trainings and stuff like that, you could get by with 4, maybe 5 nights a year. But that said, if you are one of the instructors for a wildlife training officer, those guys travel a fair bit more, just going around, and they'll do evaluations for a week at a time, or if you're attending other trainings, things like that. So, I mean, anywhere from 4 to 5 nights, you could spend a month away from your home every year. Just depends on what you're involved in. That stuff is kind of by choice and what you want to do as an officer.
What would you say is the best way for people? Getting a little feedback, but what would you say is the best way for people to get their foot in the door with your agency?
For us, it's typically having some sort of experience or knowledge about the department. We hire a lot of people like myself come from out of state, so it's not necessarily you need to um, have some sort of a seasonal job with our agency. But the best way is, I mean, even just ride-alongs with an officer or a seasonal job or something like that. And then when you take that seasonal job, um, go out, work hard, ask a lot of questions, and just try to meet as many people as you can. And we see seasonals that come on that I've never met. Then there's others that they're doing their job, they're out asking questions, trying to learn stuff, and try to make that internship or that seasonal job as well-rounded as they can.
What are some of the benefits of your position? That could be health benefits, retirement, vacation, or just things that you consider to be perks of the job.
So for me, some of the biggest benefits is our schedule. It's because we don't really have a schedule. Other than designated meetings and trainings that I have to attend, my boss doesn't tell me when I have to work. There's expectations out there that you're going to work some nights and weekends and stuff like that. But for me, I've got 3 kids of my own, and that that flexibility is really nice with my family. So if my wife is working, I got a kid that's sick, I don't have anything going on, I can go grab the kid from daycare or wherever, run him to a doctor's appointment, or just stay at home with them. And I can flex my hours out later. So for me, that scheduling is really huge. That I don't have a schedule for the most part. The other thing, like the state benefits in our state, our pay isn't real great. I'll tell you that right now, but it's also not terrible, because we do have a little bit lower cost of living than a lot of states. There's no state income tax or anything like that. The state's health plan coverage is decent, but it's really cheap. A lot of other agencies I look at, I mean, if I was to move to work for a county, or I know other agencies, you talk to guys, and I mean, they're paying $450 to $550 plus a month just for health coverage. I can insure my whole family for health coverage for about $80 a month. So having that's cheap is nice. The state's got a defined benefit retirement program. I want to say it takes 5 or 6 years to technically be vested, something like that. But having that defined benefit program is nice. We have a rule of 75, so it's age plus years of service. You're eligible for full retirement. So me, I started right out at 21 years old. I can retire at 48 and a half. Eligible for retirement. I can stick around longer if I want, or I'm still done before I'm 50. I can go out and work another job for 5 or 10 years, or whatever I want to do. So for me, the retirement side is nice, and then the flexibility is great.
Okay, well, obviously, as a conservation officer, there's a certain element of risk with your job. Can you elaborate on those, and like what measures you guys take to avoid risks? How dangerous is the job of a game warden?
So there's all sorts of statistics out there. I mean, there's always risk when you're dealing with wildlife, from bites and getting kicked by a deer or something like that. That side doesn't worry me so much as like the criminal element. Different stations, it changes a little bit with who you deal with, the type of people, but there's always that risk there. We work most of the time by ourselves. A lot of stuff we do that's higher risk is working guys that are hunting or shooting stuff at night. And there is that risk there. I've seen statistics that and park rangers in a category that the chances of being assaulted or killed at work is higher than a typical police officer, which I can believe that. What's really nice to help mitigate those is the training our agency provides us is by far probably the best out of any law enforcement agency in the whole state. We got us doing firearms a number of times a year, defensive tactics, things like that. They do a really good job training us. Every year, part of our stuff in the fall is they'll do scenarios. And years ago, these scenarios used to be kind of stump to stump, where there was no, no matter what you did, it's going to end poorly for you. And now what they do is they take these scenarios and it's stuff that's happened to guys in the field. So they'll either take something that happened in the last year or two, so they're always current, and either keep it real similar or they'll tweak it just a little bit. And the instructors, they always kind of feed off of the officers. So if you're doing things right, they're going to go that way. Or if you're saying stuff or doing things that could be better, they'll go down that road too. So I mean, there's always that, but it's always good to keep us thinking. So it's nice that way that knowing that we do have some of probably the best training in the state.
Okay. What do you wish you would have known when you were starting out in this career path?
I don't know. I think I had a pretty good background and knowledge going into it. For me, you go out and do a ride along, and it's usually out doing patrol stuff. I wish I had a little bit more knowledge of the day-to-day kind of workings of some of the stuff you don't always hear about in the books or the movies. Just the administrative side of things, or I don't know, just some of the stuff you don't really hear about that we end up doing a fair amount of the time. Whether it's reports or trainings and meetings, things like that, just knowing a little bit more of that coming into it than what I
did. Other question for you. Since you grew up in Colorado and then made the move to the Plains states, what advice do you have for students who have their heart set on living and working in the mountains and are maybe more hesitant to reach out to other states, but yet they really want to be a game officer?
So for me, the mountains are cool, but don't have your heart set on any one thing. We have that apply here from out of state or in state, and they stay for their entire career. We also have people that'll start here, work for a few years, and then get some experience, and then move back to a home state till they're closer to family or whatever. But the thing to think about or look at is once you start stuck on a station, you're not stuck there forever. Our state is, to me, it's pretty diverse, and there's a lot other things to look at too. I mean, if you want to go live on the plains on the eastern side of the state where it's fairly flat, a couple of rivers and trees, things like that, or you want to go work in the Black Hills close to Mount Rushmore, you can do that. If you want to work in a more metropolitan type setting where I'm at now, that's got probably north of 225,000 people, you can do that. If you want to go work in a county that's rural, that might have 3,000 people in the whole county, that's possible too. There's a big diversity there. And I mean, you look at, like for me, I grew up in Colorado, so I kind of knew a little bit about that. I didn't know a ton about other states. I mean, there's different agencies and things like that, but I always encourage people to look around. The state, the job is for the most part the same or very similar. It may change just a little bit, but overall it's there. And there's a lot of cool states out there. I go to a conference. It's a part of an association of game wardens from throughout the country. And I mean, you'll sit there and talk with folks, and some states have one thing better, one thing's a little worse. And there's always pros and cons to everywhere you go, but there's a lot of cool states out there in the country. And, if you got your heart set on one thing, go try something else. Some places are harder than others to get hired, but just look around. For me, I wish, looking back at it, it'd been really cool to sit and just research what other states have and different opportunities and things like that. And it's kind of fun to get out of your comfort zone a little bit and to see what else the world has to offer.
Awesome. That kind of concludes the questions I had for you, Chris. Do you have any final thoughts for our college students?
Not a lot. Just, I mean, work hard, keep your nose clean, ask a lot of questions. There's a lot of great resources out there from schools and different universities. Reach out, call folks. I mean, that's the time to learn. I wish, like I said, I've got ride-alongs that I take on that you sit there for 2 to 8 hours and it about kills you because they don't ask anything or think out of the box. And I really like it when people ask questions and they want to learn. So just try to diversify your background as best you can and just absorb as much as you can in and take every experience and see what you can learn from it.
Awesome. Good advice.
Yep.
Well, thank you very much for not only your time this afternoon, but also just for the work that you do in protecting our resources and our people. So you guys are behind the scenes most of the time, but we sure appreciate the work that you do in other states. So I'm going to go ahead and end the recording, and then I'll just follow up with you for a minute.
Sounds good.